Learned about that. Just real high level. Who are these people that Jude's writing to? What's going on with them?
They're believers.
They're believers, yep. What are their circumstances? What's going on there?
False teachers.
False teachers are coming in, yep. Just false doctrine?
False teachers.
Well, they're false teachers. Is it?
Teaching a false doctrine.
They are teaching false, yeah, is it only that? Is there anything else going on with these guys? Did you see? Nothing?
Yes.
Yeah.
We turn grace into licentiousness.
Yeah, it's not just what the way they act is connected with their false doctrine, right? Their behavior reflects an issue in their doctrine as well. So when he says at the beginning, the faith once for all delivered, and we looked at that, remember we saw that faith is connected. It's a whole life faith. It's not just some intellectual thing, and we see that played out if we're looking carefully at what it says about these people that have come in and their relationship to these guys. So that's important. All right. Anything else jump out at you? There's some other things, but that's high level. That's pretty good. What about were there any cultural? Chris, did you get to the cultural stuff?
Yeah, we talked about the love feasts.
The love feasts, right? There's good.
Oh, no, that's, yeah.
We talked about the love feast. That's what you were saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you can't really, can't really interpret it. You just see that it says love feast.
Right. There's no information in Jude about the love feast.
Yeah.
So this is another example. There are two cultural things that we've seen now so far. So does anybody remember the first one we saw, which we picked up on actually a couple of weeks ago? Something that is not common in our culture, but is this very first reference he makes to himself as being a slave, a bondservant. So there's two cultural things. We got this love feast thing, and we've got this, he refers to himself as a slave, as a bondservant, they translate it here. And so those are two examples of when you're studying on your own, where a study Bible or going to an additional resource can be helpful, because there's nothing in here about what that means, right? You can read through the scripture and get a lot of information on bondservants, on slaves, but what that looked like in the Roman world, that would be a perfectly appropriate place to go do some research. I've asked you not to, so next week I will give that to you. But in the love feast, the same thing. There's not a lot of information on it, but the context in which it's used in this letter does tell us a few things about it. Who are the love feasts for? Believers, right? And so there's some sort of, just the name sort of implies this too. There's some sort of intimacy about this. It's a gathering of believers in some kind. The word feast would indicate that they're eating together, and these people have infiltrated them. Now, what that means, we can sort of extrapolate from that these love feasts are some sort of fellowship event in the life of the church, right? Okay. So if you look at your observation checklist, the next thing, and by the way, I don't know if you had a chance to look at the website, but I summarized the notes that I've taken from your comments and observations up through last week. You've pulled a lot of information out of here already. But now we're going to start to go into some things that maybe you haven't seen before or may not have used regularly anyway. So we go into number 6 on the observation checklist. How is it structured? And most of the time when people are reading things, they're not really thinking a lot about structure. But the way that a written document is structured, the way the information is structured, is important, because that's sort of the skeleton, if you will, that all the information is hanging on. And so The structure will dramatically affect kind of how you're reacting or interacting with the text. It's how is it organized, right? What's the organization of this? And those things don't happen haphazardly, right? So when somebody sits down to write something, they structure, they organize the material a certain way, and they have a reason for it. What are they trying to emphasize? What are they not wanting to get bogged down in? And in a little while, Brother Chris is going to be preaching a sermon to us, and there's going to be a structure to it. There's no way he's going to get up there and say everything that could possibly be said about whatever he's preaching on. So he's got to decide how to organize it, how is it going to flow, and where are you going to build to a point where you're emphasizing something, and what things are you not going to mention because you don't want to go down some rabbit trail. That's all part of what he's doing. Same thing with Jude, same thing with anybody. So if we look at number 6, how's it structured? And then one of the probably more confusing bullet points on this sheet, A, apply genre appropriate tools. Well, you probably don't know intuitively what that means, but here's what that means. Remember, let's reverse back when we were asking what kind of literature is this? This is where this becomes really important. Do you remember, narratives are this plot structure, right? You're introducing characters, you have a problem, rising action, the climax, falling action, things are resolved, and then you have the new state of affairs in a narrative. Well, Jude is not a narrative. So we talked about Jude having an intro. This is part of the structure. Then the body of the letter, and then the conclusion. And then remember there were some other things, greetings and postscripts and other things you find in there, but this is the meat of it. Now, do you remember what we said about how a letter works? What's happening in this intro, leading into the body, into the conclusion? Is it telling a story? Nope, you're right, Matt. It's not telling a story. There may be stories in there, but that's not the overall structure of it. Anybody remember? It's a flow of ideas, right? It's an argument. So a letter is an argument. Something has happened that caused somebody to write it, to convey some information, to get a certain response. So in a letter, you're going to have in the body a series of arguments or one argument. And here's the thing. The idea when you're reading a letter is to think in paragraphs. How is each point connected to the next one? How does it flow? So letters are about logical flow. Narratives are about the flow of the plot. And poetry is about the imagery and the connections that you're making in terms of, the images. So when we look at a letter, you're going to have an intro, and there's a lot of information usually in that intro because often that's where the author's telling you what they're trying to do. Then you have a body, which is unpacking that, a whole series of conclusions. Then the close of the letter is usually going to sort of wrap that up and reassert what needs to be done or the response that's required. So there's different ways to look at this. So most of the time, when you get to this point, most teachers would have you outline the letter, right? Like read each section and kind of go, okay, when did we move from one idea to the next idea? So let's just read through it really quickly. I'm not going to have you outline the whole thing right now, because I want to show you, most of you have, how many of you have never had to do an outline? You have, you just don't remember.
Since high school.
Okay, but the point is, what you're looking for is, when does one point stop and the next point start, right? Like number one, what's going on? We'll just do this together really quickly. And a lot of teachers focus a lot on this initial outline. I don't so much, and you'll see why. Hopefully we'll have time, you'll see why in a moment. Because this is just sort of a first blush at it. So we know that the body of the letter starts in verse 3, right? So I'm going to read this and stop me when you think we've moved on to another point. Beloved, while I was making every effort to write to you about our common salvation, I felt the necessity to write to you appealing that you contend earnestly for the faith which was once for all handed down to the saints. For certain persons have crept in unnoticed, those who were long beforehand marked out for this condemnation, ungodly persons who turn the grace of our God into licentiousness and deny our only Master and Lord Jesus Christ. Okay, so what's going on there? Just a quick, now look, everybody has their own style of this. Some people will write almost a whole paragraph, almost as long as what you read. I'm like a 1 or 2 word kind of guy. Everybody's different, but the idea is just sort of organize. What is he doing in that first paragraph?
He's telling them why he's writing.
Right. Okay, yep. Hmm? Purpose, yeah. I would just say, I'll give you an example. I would just say, if I was doing a quick outline, the urgent message about false teachers. Something like that is what I would put there. Does that make sense? All I'm trying to do is very high level capture, okay, what is he telling me here? So there's urgency about false teachers. Okay. And then, now I desire to remind you, though you know all things once for all, that the Lord, after saving a people out of Egypt, subsequently destroyed those who did not believe, and angels who did not keep their own domain but abandoned their proper abode. He is kept in eternal bonds under darkness for the judgment of the great day, just as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities around them, since they, in the same way as these, indulged in gross immorality and went after strange flesh, are exhibited as an example in undergoing the punishment of eternal fire. Yet in the same way, these men also by dreaming defile the flesh and reject authority and revile angelic majesties. But Michael the archangel, when he disputed with the devil and argued about the body of Moses, did not dare pronounce against him a railing judgment, but said, "The Lord rebuke you." But these men revile the things which they do not understand, and the things which they know by instinct, like unreasoning animals. By these things they are destroyed. Woe to them, for they have gone the way of Cain, and for pay they have rushed headlong into the error of Balaam, and perished in the rebellion of Korah. These are the men who are hidden reefs in your love feasts, when they feast with you without fear, caring for themselves, clouds without water, carried along by winds, autumn trees without fruit, doubly dead, uprooted, wild waves of the sea, casting up their own shame like foam, wandering stars, for whom the black darkness has been reserved forever. It was about these men that Enoch and the seventh generation. Oh,
No, keep going.
you guys want to arm wrestle over it, or what?
Yeah. Let's go.
So, prophesied, saying, "Behold, the Lord came with many thousands of his holy ones to execute judgment upon all, and to convict the ungodly of their ungodly deeds, which they have done in an ungodly way, and all of the harsh things which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. These are grumblers, finding fault, following after their own lusts. They speak arrogantly, flattering people for the sake of gaining an advantage."
Stop.
But everybody agree there? Okay, that's pretty good. You could make a case that you could have stopped after 7. They're related. They're absolutely related. I would have stopped after 7 only because he shifts to a much more specific treatment of their circumstances in 8. It's sort of a reminder, but either way, that's good. You guys kind of got it. So how would you summarize? There's a lot here, but just very high level, how would you summarize if we're going to do 5 through 17 or 6 through 16? Just how would you summarize this? Because this is going to be one where you're going to have some A's and B's and C's under it, right?
I think he's reminding them of historical, comparisons or similarities to what's happening currently.
Right. Okay, so how do we capture that, Chris?
Unbelief, there's unbelief involved here, right?
Yeah,
He's giving examples.
examples, right. But see, what makes this difficult to capture is he's weaving back and forth between historical examples and talking about them. So I would probably say something like the fate of false teachers, or the fate of the ungodly, or something like that. Does that make sense?
Or the nature of the ungodly.
Yeah, we could do that. The nature, fate. One of my professors would have yelled at me for using the word fate. We're not fatalists. But you know what I mean. Okay, so the first section, which is 5 through, what is it, 7? What's going on there?
Sorry, what's the question again?
Well, this whole section is the nature of the ungodly, or the fate of the ungodly. So he's talking about a few things. And now you could break this down you could break it down: Egypt, Sodom and Gomorrah, or his people, all of that. You could do that. You don't have to do that. Again, everybody outlines differently. The idea is that you get the major sections, the point. So what is this? What does the people coming out of Egypt, the angels, and Sodom and Gomorrah, what do all these have in common?
Historic accounts of godliness.
Yeah, but is there anything specifically they have in common?
Well, he's trying to remind them that the ones who are ungodly will be destroyed. It says in, 5, at the end of 5, subsequently destroyed those who did not believe. It was the same idea with Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yep. So how do we capture that?
Consequences of unbelief.
Yeah, I would say the emphasis here, we don't want to go into too much interpreting, but he's reminding them of, really, I would say, the certainty of God's judgment. And because we have categories of judgment here, God judges the people who proclaim to be his. He judges angels. So everybody's going to be judged here, basically, for that are unfaithful. Sodom and Gomorrah, and then he's connecting that to this next section. You could also say, like, it's better to tie it to the content this way. But if you said something like, they're not going to get away with it, you're on the right track. In the same way, these men also, so this next section, this next subsection, probably goes through what? We should put these.
16.
16? What about, yeah, you could do that. You could break 14 out as well. You know what I mean? It depends on your style. But this one, four. What do you guys think?
More from 14, he begins to show where God comes into play, where he's saying these ungodly people and how he has judged them. Convict the ungodly and their ungodly deeds. He's saying,
Yeah, but
it's gonna get to this.
yeah, and you could do that. You don't have to, though, because look, as he finishes 13, he starts 14 with, it was about also these men. So he's continuing a discussion of them. You see that? There's not a wrong answer here. One of the things about this, don't overthink it. Don't overthink it, because you're going to we're going to analyze this 6 different ways. You're going to end up, if we're wrong about something, you'll see it hopefully by the time you're done. So you could put subpoints under here if you're one of those very detail-oriented people, or you could go all the way to 16 if you wanted to do that. Or no, wait.
seems that the comment is they reject authority. And then 12
Yeah,
through 16, maybe, they reject propriety.
that is, you can, that's right. You can do it that way. Oh, you guys just, we're doing this as a group. You wanna break it down smaller or bigger? Do you care? You might not care. Well, does everybody agree with what Jim says here? What did you say, Jim? And B is what, about authority?
Reject authority and then reject propriety.
Right?
And again, 12 is a warning that you can't filtration too, you know. Not filtration into the beloved. That was his
And so the next section is 12 through what?
16.
And say it again and see if folks agree with you. You said, he's speaking about the fact that they reject propriety, or,
Well, it would be, they're like hidden reefs, you know, they're sneaky, to get their way. And, ultimately, they're empty, clouds without water, carried along with wind, no fruit, doubly dead, et cetera, et cetera.
yeah. Anybody else have a suggestion here? I would go through 13 here. Again, it's not a right or wrong answer, it's just how you can capture this in your own mind.
Maybe description of the ungodly?
Yeah, they're unfruitful teachers or unproductive teachers, right? That's really the issue. So the clouds without water, autumn trees without fruit, doubly dead, uprooted, wild waves of the sea, wandering stars.
That gives a description of, to me, that's a description of a person that does it, either a non-believer or someone that is, they may not realize that they
Well,
lost
it's a little bit more than that. Again, we're not interpreting it, but all of these are, yes, this is clearly somebody who's an unbeliever, but this isn't just an unbeliever. This is somebody who has not faith, who is trying to guide others. Look,
Right.
let's just think about this for a second. The hidden reefs, what's a hidden reef?
Something that, I would say, something that's not easily seen, but it's there.
Right, so what is a reef? It's a rocks or coral under the surface of the water. So what happens if you hit that? You sink, most likely, right? You're certainly gonna be damaged. But on the surface of the water, you can't see that, right? That's the point. Like, it looks like smooth sailing, but these guys are an obstacle in your way. They're gonna make shipwreck of your faith. They're hidden, you can't see this. There's a danger here, right? But now, listen to what he says about this. And we're gonna go through and look at all these references when we get to the point, but just really quick. Clouds without water. So these guys didn't have, the Absolpure guy wasn't gonna come deliver. They didn't have irrigation systems. So when you see a cloud, that's a blessing in Palestine. It's gonna rain. We're gonna have water. Well, they have the appearance of bringing blessing, but there's no water in those clouds. Carried along by winds, they're unstable, right? Autumn trees without fruit. Same thing, right? It's harvest season. You're hungry. You go, man, there's some apples on that tree. There aren't any apples on the tree. So they have the appearance of one thing, they have appearance of blessing, but there's no blessing. They're doubly dead. Bad enough to be dead, but to be doubly dead. What happens when a tree's doubly dead? Uprooted. there's no root in them.
Foundation.
There's no sustenance to be found there. Wild waves of the sea. That's dangerous, right? You're being cast about in every direction. Casting up their own shame like foam. If you ever see the sea foam,
Yeah,
what is it good for?
destruction.
Nothing. Sea foam is like the nastiest stuff in the world. It stinks. There's nothing you can do with it. It has no substance to it, really. If you try to grab onto it, it's just gone. Wandering stars. What's a wandering star? This is an interesting way does anybody know what a wandering star is? Yeah, it's a comet or a shooting star, right? So what's the problem with that?
Flash and it's gone.
Yeah, it could be, but what would they have used to navigate? If you're following a wandering star, you're going to be lost, right? They're just like the waves, just like the wind. It's unstable. You're not going to be able to find your way.
Seems like those two verses are very illustrative in comparison to the ones before were more historical examples, right?
Right. So how do we capture this description? Right. Unproductive or even dangerous. Leaders, maybe, I don't know. There seems to be some issues of authority here. And then the last section here.
Ungodly.
Yeah, well, I mean, we haven't got to the point where we're looking for repetition yet, but even if you don't know anything about this method, something should jump out to you here, right? It was also about these men that Enoch in the seventh generation from Adam prophesied, saying, behold, the Lord came with many thousands of his holy ones to execute judgment upon all and to convict all the ungodly of their ungodly deeds, which they've done in an ungodly way, and all of the harsh things which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. 4 times that description is used in 2 verses. 1 verse. 4 times in 1 verse. So what do you think his emphasis is there?
Warning about people like that.
Yeah. They're grumblers, finding fault, following after their own lust, speaking arrogantly, flattering people for the sake of gaining an advantage. Sounds like some Christian TV stations. What are we gonna say here?
What are those words after unproductive?
I got teachers or leaders. Again, you can use your own words for this. What I'm just trying to show you is what you want to do. The first step in structure is to just try to look at it and say, how is it broken up? Like, how's it moving from one emphasis to another emphasis? And we're going to see this in a little more detail in a moment. But do you sort of get the idea how this works? Is you a good refresher on how to outline? Is there anybody who's like, I have no idea what we're doing right now? You get it?
Well,
Kind
I
of?
had to do it, so I get it. Only thing I guess my thing is that each stage, there's examples of what he's trying to explain that is happening.
We're gonna get into this in great detail, but so right now you don't want to overdo it. We're just looking for, where does he shift from talking about one thing to talking about something else? That's another way. Huh?
In 17, he changed it now.
Yeah, 17, but you, right?
Yes.
So we can keep going with this, but this is good homework for you to finish outlining this. And again, I'm not gonna check them, but it would be good it would be good practice for you, just to say, okay, did the subject change? Did the person who he's talking to or about change, right? Did it change? And you can get really detailed or really high level, that's okay. What you wanna get is what are the main building blocks of this? This is one chapter. If you're studying a long book like Romans or something, this becomes very helpful because there are things where you're saying, wait a minute, what is he addressing here? Oh, it's in this context of this section. And I would normally spend more time on this, but since this is a little more advanced class, I'm gonna show you another level of outlining that most of you probably haven't seen before, that I think is even more helpful. This is useful, doing this first, especially in a longer letter, because the next thing I'm gonna show you, we're gonna do it on the whole book together. You wouldn't normally, you would do it on a section. And so in a long letter or book, you'd want to see the sections and do each section, or where you want to apply the tool. Okay? Any questions about just outlining?
Will that be on the website?
I'm gonna end up, yeah, give me a week or two, I'll put it up there. Are we good? Can I erase this? All right.
So the bigger book, what do you do? Just keep repeating this chapter after chapter? Or?
Well, the first thing is don't pay any attention to where the chapters start and stop, because the chapters are not in the original.
Right.
But yes, you just do the whole letter or the whole book. This is an important step. I'm going through it quickly because we're dealing with a one chapter letter, and so there's a little less value here, and I want to show you some other things. But if you're doing Hebrews or Romans or 1 Corinthians, this is really helpful, because he's shifting. There's, the topics are shifting, and you think, well, what is he talking about here? You can go back and refer to that outline and go, oh wait, he brings this up while he's talking about this other issue. So it just helps you build the context around it. And I'm gonna show you some other tools to do that too, but especially you can get lost in one of those big letters. And this helps you go, okay, wait a minute, we're talking about false teachers here in this section. We're talking about believers in this section. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. All right, so the next thing that I want to show you though is a tool that is incredibly helpful. It takes a little more work. We're going to do this one together, but I call it phrasing. You'll sometimes hear it called mechanical diagramming or mechanical outlining. And what this is breaking the argument down. Because remember, we're in a letter, so we're trying to follow the argument. What is the author trying to tell us to do? Or how is this? What's the point of this, and how is it all connected? So the language in any one of these things you study is built on a series of phrases. So this is a way where, how many of you loved grammar in school? Not a single hand? Diana, you loved grammar? You love grammar? All right, well, so, you can get into sentence diagramming and stuff, which is pretty advanced. And if you love grammar, there's even more you can do with it. But this is a way for someone who doesn't love grammar to get to the same, or pretty close to the same place. And in fact, sometimes I will use this when I'm looking at a book to preach to figure out what sections to preach on, like where to break things off and things like that. So I just call it phrasing. And I'm going to start with, if you learn how to do this, whenever you encounter something that is difficult and you're like, I'm trying to understand how to interpret this or how to, break this down and follow the flow of this, this is a tremendously powerful tool for doing that. Again, if you're dealing with a massive letter, you first want to have outlined it so that you're only, focusing on the section relevant to that immediate context. But I'm going to start with an example, not from the Bible, just to show you how it works. And then it looks like next week we'll start going through this. So I would like to go to the store, but first I must brush my teeth and clean my room. I just made that up, I don't know why. I didn't have a pre-loaded example. So, now, this is a whole bundle of words, right? And if you look at each word individually, it doesn't tell you much of anything, right? You can't analyze one word. A lot of Bibles, I see a lot of Bible studies, they spend a ton of time analyzing a single word. Honestly, that's not super helpful. There are times it is, and if you have a key word you really want to understand, that's part of doing that, but I think people spend way too much time on that. And I kind of smile sometimes because I've had, you run into people who have never studied Greek or Hebrew, but they looked it up on the internet and they're telling you all about what this word means, and you're like, no, that's not how it's being used in that context. You can't just pick a meaning of, and insert the one you like. Preachers are really bad at that, but it doesn't work that way. So here's what we want to do. We want to break this up into phrases. Even if you don't know anything about grammar, you can start to see how the chunks of this are put together. Okay, what the most basic phrase here? What's the main point of what this person is trying to say? They want to go to the store. That's one phrase. Okay? And we might be able to break that up again, but okay, what's the next piece? Got to brush your teeth and clean their room. Okay, so here's what you do. How many of you use like a word how many of you like use a computer when you're studying? Because you're going to do it a couple different ways. A few of you guys. So I do this in Word or Google Docs or whatever. I actually do it, and you can write it out this way, or you can use notation to do it. But the very first thing is, I would like. They like something. So I start over here at the left. That's the main phrase they would like. Now you could put I would like to go to the store if you want, but I put I would like, because the first thing is the main point that's being explained here is I have a desire. A desire to do what? Then I would indent this to go, and you could indent it further, but to the store. But that but is just as important as this, because, let me explain this next phrase, to go to the store, can't stand on its own. If I just came here and said, to go to the store, you'd be like, what? If I said, I would like to go to the store, that makes sense, right? So you have a phrase when you can't break it down anymore, where it doesn't make sense anymore. So I would like to go to the store. Again, you could put that there. But isn't dependent on this, it's equal to it. But and are always equal. So actually that's a good, there are a couple grammatical things you need to know. These are always equal. So when you see an and or a but, it's coming back out to the same level. But what? I must
Brush your teeth.
right. So it's going to be here, because I would like to go to the store, but I must brush my teeth. And
That's another route.
right,
And then put
clean my room. So this isn't a very big example, but you can see right away, actually, this right here is the main point. But these this is what he has to do, right? In order to do this. So this is a very small, but when you start to do this with a letter, you're going to start to be able to see the main flow of the argument, to the point where if you do this in next week, we're going to do it together with this letter. That's why I gave you another example. If you just read all the stuff to the left, you now have a summary of the argument in the letter. all the noise, all the if this and you need to do that and this guy did this and that guy did that gets compressed under, so you can get the main idea by just reading the main phrases to the left. Then all the other content and examples and everything else will come under that. So for example, if you're trying to figure out, well, what's the main, because this is what we're gathering information so we can interpret it. And it's really critical to understand what's the main point, what's the main idea, because the supporting information needs to be interpreted in light of the main idea. You see what I mean? You listen to a lot of sermons and you read a lot of devotionals where they're going off on some tangent on something and you go, that's fine, but that's not what the guy's talking about. You know what I mean? That's not the main idea. So it's great to get all this insight from all this detail, but don't miss the main idea. You want to get the main idea. And so as we go through this, we'll be able to see the main argument, and then it'll be very easy to see, well, how is he supporting that argument? What evidence is he using? What references are being used? There's a few things in this class that you can take with you and apply that are very powerful. This is one of them. You know, if you were to focus on, I must brush my teeth, if you were to preach a sermon or try to talk to somebody about brushing their teeth, without reference to why he wants to or why he needs to, you're gonna start taking this out of context, right? You know, you're gonna start making this the main thing when this is the main thing. Does that make sense? So I know that most of you probably haven't done this before, so we're gonna do this all together, and when we're done with this and we shift over to start to interpreting, I guarantee you're gonna be surprised by how much clearer the flow of this letter is. Okay? Any last questions? God bless. Have a great week.